Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sisterhood Society podcast. We have the most exciting guest today. This is our mom. Say hi.
Hi.
Her name's Candy, so you don't have to call her mom, I guess. Everyone can call you Candy. And today is going to be a really sweet episode. It's something we've been wanting to do for a long time, and we've been trying to convince her to come on and share all of her goodness and knowledge with all of you guys. And so many of you already know my mom, but if you don't, or our mom, I should say, if you don't, this will be a treat for you. So this is going to be such a cool episode. Before we dive in, we always do what's good in the sisterhood. So we thought, Mom, do you want to start? Something that's good in your life?
Go ahead. Let me think.
Okay, Whitney, you start.
Okay, so I started keto this week. And I just felt like I needed to shed the weight that I've been just like packing on and feel like God's really just brought me to a place where he's like, you know what, you can let that stuff go, because it was emotional weight, emotional eating. And so today is the first day that I did like 20 grams of 20 grams of carbs. And let me just side preface this. I know that keto is not for everybody. And I know that some people hate it. And a lot of people say it's not good for you and blah, blah, blah. It's good for me because I have like thyroid issues. So staying off sugar, actually, my body responds really well to it. And so anyways, I have these keto strips that kind of detect ketones. And I'm only on my first day and I'm already like have ketones getting produced.
Nice.
So I feel like that is huge because it's showing that my body's already like already
responding.
Responding, yeah, but also burning fat. And so I really just need to stick with it. And I'm like not hungry, like I'm eating the exact amount that I need. And I'm just feeling really great and encouraged.
Good. That's awesome. Honestly, we talked about that with Renee. Like, who gives a crap? If it works for you, like, it doesn't matter if it works for one person, not the other. That's because our bodies are different. So
yeah. And I feel like if it doesn't work for someone, then they like make it like a huge priority to like put the kibosh on it for everybody else and like try to make it, I don't know, like they try to like deconstruct it and be like, sorry, this is why it doesn't work for you, so you shouldn't try it. And I'm like, actually, keto has always done really well for me. So yeah, anyways, I'm very encouraged. I love it. It's sustainable. I'm eating food that I actually like. I can eat cheese. So
yeah, I mean, what diet can you eat cheese on? It's really gorgeous. Honestly, yeah. I mean, that's like the best thing about keto is, I mean, a lot of times you do keto for like a period of time and then you shift it. So it's not like a forever thing. It's not like you're never going to eat carbs again. It's just a nice jumpstart. I got what was it? Vertigo from doing keto.
So yeah, about that. I think you actually got vertigo from excess salt because you had soy sauce a few days before that.
No, it was the Gatorade Zeros. They said but that's
they've got like crazy amounts of salt in them. So typically vertigo stems from having too much salt for people that don't have issues with vertigo normally. However, I don't feel like your body likes keto, or at least you always say you don't feel good on it. So if you don't feel good on it, don't do it.
I'm in my sourdough bread era right now. So I can't be on keto because I am enjoying bread. Okay, Tara, what's good in your life?
Well, Brian and I didn't go out for Valentine's Day this week, and Delaney had reached out, our old babysitter, to ask if she could see the kids. And I was like, your ears must be burning because I was just thinking about you the other day. So she's actually coming tonight and we're going out. We've made no plans. So I was like, maybe I should do that little thing where you take the two Post-its and you have two different options and you just
make Brian choose. You should and video it for the Patreon.
And just make our whole evening a this or that situation.
There's mom probably doesn't know, but on TikTok, there's like a trend where you hold like two note cards and the camera can see what they say. And they do it with little kids, usually, where like, if you're going to take your little girl on a date, it'll say like nails or I'm trying to think of another example, like get a manicure, get a pedicure. And then they'll pick the card. And the next one is like, get a smoothie or get a slushie. And anyways, the little kid thinks it's so fun, but some people do it with their spouse. Like the husband will do it with his wife for like her birthday. So she's saying she should do it with Brian. I'm sure Brian would look thrilled.
I was just thinking that sounds like more of a Valentine's Day fun thing for you than it does for him. I feel like he would dread that.
I'd have to give him a heads up to see if he'd be willing to let me record it, because he'd probably be like, Tara, is this necessary? Tara.
Phil would do the same because he does not like to be on camera. And every time I get my phone out, he's always like, I don't want to be on it. I don't want to be in it. Anytime I'm doing like he has for the IVF stuff, he has, because he knows we'll rewatch it later. Like I'm almost like doing a video diary of our like experience. So I feel like he doesn't mind that, because it's like, it will be cool for him to be in it and rewatch it. But if I'm just like in the car randomly filming, he's always like, your followers want to see you, not me. And I'm like, actually, they like to see you. They want to know what's going on with you. And they do actually love Phil, but he's not like shy. I don't even know what you would call his personality.
It's like with the niece and nephews. It's like the less he gives you, the more you want.
Yeah.
And you're jonesing for more,
the attention.
He's mysterious.
Yes. I think that's what it is people think that like there's more to him than there is, and they want to know more. They want to know more. And I'm like, actually, he's just very simple.
Somebody messaged me after we launched the Patreon and was like, we're really just all here for more Brian content.
Seriously.
That's good.
I love when Brian's in your videos, because I think your banter together is always really funny. And like, I know that we always give you a hard time about like you jabbing at Brian, but he gives it right back, which is what makes your banter cute. Like it's very like rom-com-y that you guys are like going back and forth and like have a very sarcastic relationship.
It's like on the day that I did my takeover and he walked out of the room. When I started filming, he walked out of the room because he was like, I need to fix my hair.
What's funny is like so I was editing that and I was like, Tara, what did he say? Because I like when it's too soft, like if you're whispering, I have to put in like subtitles. And I was like, did he say he needed to go fix his hair?
And
Tara was like, yes.
Down. His shorts were falling down and he needed to fix his pants or his hair. Those are the two things.
It was the one sliver of Brian that we've gotten so far on the Patreon.
Funny.
It's always cute because when Tara's videoing, you'll hear him in the kitchen going, is there some reason why the kids threw this in the trash?
He's always in the background. He's like, why don't you tell me when you're filming? And I'm like, because you're always asking a question. Like,
that's cute.
That's so
We've got
funny.
two conversations going on, hers and then what he's observing in the kitchen with the kids.
That's
always.
Cute.
Okay, I'll do my good to give mom a little bit more time, and then we can hop into what's good. She has a lot of good. She just got back from world travels.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we got our egg retrieval report back today, which we got 7 eggs from the 16 mature eggs, or 7 embryos. And so one of the girls in my book club, my friend Rachel, just texted and said, did you realize that 7 is an ordained number? And I was like, I didn't even think about it being a holy number. So that was actually a really cute connection. I'm
pretty sure I said that this morning in the sister text. I was like, 7 is a holy number.
Oh, I don't remember seeing that.
You need to listen to me more.
It's so likely to just ignore you.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I don't remember that. I was also like knees deep into invoicing on VIP at the time too. I was like trying to multitask a million things. But anyways, so now our embryos are going to testing, and so that's an exciting update. Also, Phil's travels start tomorrow. Like he's going to be gone every weekend until June 1st. But we were counting up the weekends and stuff, and tonight he doesn't actually go. They're going to London. They're going to the UK for 6 shows that Kelsey has, like a little mini like UK tour. And actually the shows are sold out, which is super cool. But this is really stupid. But on weekends, on Saturday mornings, we have this new tradition where Phil makes pancakes. It's not really tradition. He just makes pancakes. That sounds really stupid. But like we wake up and like have a leisurely morning and we don't have plans. And he's been making pancakes every morning, like all winter long. And he makes really good pancakes. So we've kind of like gotten to this routine on Saturday mornings that's really fun. And he came home really late last night from Whiskey Jam and he was like, I have some really good news. And I was like, what? And he's like, my flight doesn't leave until like 6, so we can have pancake Saturday. And I was like, oh, that is good news. Because when we were making pancakes last Saturday, he was like, this is so sad. This is the last pancake Saturday we're going to have in like 3 months. So anyways, that was nice. A little good that we get to have tomorrow. So anyways, we were getting the car wash the other day and he wrote down all the days he was going to be home in March. And like, he showed me his phone and he's like, Kate, look how many days I'm going to be home in March. It's like so many. And I counted and it was like 9 days. And I was like, Phil, that's not a lot. He's like, oh, it felt like more when I was writing them out.
Perspective, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fine. I was like, we've been through worse. And these tours, he's getting to be home during the week, which is super nice. So yeah, okay, Mom, what's your good?
Well, you talked about us traveling, and I had to think this trip was 4 weeks in California at our timeshare, and then it was Dave usually has a golf trip mid-February.
Mm-hmm.
He usually goes to Florida, but because of the hurricane in Florida, they couldn't do that. So his buddies decided to meet him in Palm Springs mid-February. So normally we'd be home by that time, but he said, I'm not going to fly home and fly back for that. And so I said, why don't we go to Hawaii? He said, oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So I thought, well, I haven't been to Hawaii. We have been to Maui. And so long story short, you should have seen the trip plans that I had to make between rental cars and all of our flights ended up being one way because they were a better price and got us to the place that we wanted to be. I mean, it was ridiculous. I felt like Tara with her lists. I had everything, we had to stay at a hotel, the night before the flight to Hawaii and the night when we came back in. And it was crazy between rental cars, hotels, all the trip plans. I had it all written out.
Mm-hmm.
And when we flew back, I said to Dave, I said, we navigated this incredibly well. I thought this is just going to be ridiculous,
Mm-hmm.
And it all worked out great. And none of the plans went awry, which is normally my MO is I've messed something up.
Mm.
And it gets to be a bigger problem, like getting a rental car not from the airport, not realizing that the rental car is 20 minutes away.
I was just going to say that did happen.
Remember that. Yeah.
And we had to wait a really long time to find out where the car was. And we were all
Yeah.
starving. So we all bought like $50 smoothies. Do you remember that? Those smoothies were like so expensive.
Yeah.
I didn't mind. I didn't have anywhere to be. I was just happy to be on vacation. But I think the cool thing about you guys getting to travel now is you and Dad worked so hard for so long that, especially Dad being an entrepreneur for so long, it's cool to like see him get to relax, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
yes. And to be able to enjoy it. It was
Right.
all really, really, really sweet. Not only did we get to see friends in California, but one
Yeah.
friend in Kauai, and then just having that time. Then
Yeah.
and now he's golfing with some buddies. So to end
I
it.
was actually asking my father-in-law about that over Christmas, because I was saying he was a big manager at State Farm for like years, 35 years, and he's retired now. And I was like, even someone who doesn't own their own business, can you ever like fully check out on vacation? And he said, no. Like, he was like, I felt like the first 2 days you're like tired from traveling. And then you can check out for like 2 or 3 days at the beach. But then by Friday, you're like, oh crap, I have to be back at work on Monday. So you start thinking about all the things you have to do. And he's like, even though I wasn't like the business owner because I managed people, he was like, I didn't ever really feel like until I was retired that I enjoyed vacations the way that you are supposed to.
Mm,
So
that's
that's what I meant
interesting.
by that. Like,
Yeah.
dad
Yeah.
finally like mentally have like be checked
Mhm.
out.
Right.
I just remember before you guys left for California, I was talking to Dad and he was saying like, yeah, we're leaving the 4th or whatever the date was. And I was like, that's odd. I think Mom said that the date was like the 5th or like the date was wrong. And Mom's eyes got big and she's like, I'll check that.
Yeah.
She was like, it would be just like me that I planned to check in on the wrong day and our flights are not the right day. And so it was just
That's
kind of
so
Oh, I'm telling you, I had a list, two pages of lists of all the confirmation numbers and everything. It was lots of maneuvering.
It was cute because Corey,
It all worked.
our cousin Corey, said that him and his wife love travel planning. And you'd been talking about a Europe trip. And he's like, I love planning trips. It doesn't bother me at all. And you're like, I'm gonna call you about my next trip. And Dad's like, and she will. She'll hold you to it. Like, she'll call you. And Corey was like, please, I'm so good at it. Like, let me know. And I was like, honestly, we used a travel planner for our Europe trip. And it was like, I was just gonna say, I commend you because I feel like you are really, really organized. Like, you've
Oh,
gotten to be an incredibly organized person and your house is immaculate always. But I was going to say, it does make such a difference to have someone, especially in a country you don't know. I mean, it's a little bit different, I guess, domestically, but
Mhm.
it gets to be really overwhelming. So kudos to you for making those plans.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to dive into the meat and potatoes of the episode. One thing that we kind of wanted to touch on, and one thing, well, we'll play the compliment game at the end. Your mom. But one thing I wanted to mention and kind of like segueing into our conversation is I feel like, or we know that your gifting has been and your calling has been to mentor younger women. And one thing I feel like has been really, I was saying on the phone, one thing I wanted to talk about was how your spiritual walk has always been like focused on raising the next generation of women, essentially. And that's been like your passion. And so one, I think it's not ironic that you had three girls. And two, I feel like it's been cool to kind of see like your purpose also woven in and out of how you raised us and how we feel really strongly that our purpose is community of women and like how to foster who God has entrusted us with through this business, but also with the community that we've been given. And so it's just been kind of cool to see those tied together. So you had mentioned on the phone that you felt like that really transpired more so, like the mentoring piece of your life and your relationship with the Lord had kind of transpired more so as you became an empty nester.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
And yeah,
go
if you want
ahead.
to share a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think it's really important, particularly, as you're raising your kids and you are building a business and you've got the ups and downs, the adversity of it, as you girls have seen, being in business for yourself. Dave was very entrepreneurial. And so there was a lot of stress through that in the building of that business. And, as you're walking through life, you're trying to do the best you can, raising your children. And there's so much focus on all those things. And then you become empty nesters and you're like, okay, here it's now you started out with the two of you and now it's just the two of you left. And you kids had moved back to Illinois because you wanted to be around extended family as well as build your life there and not out in California. And I think what it does is it really shines a spotlight on how much work you've done and how much you have worked to maintain the two of you through that time of building, right? And what I realized is when I got to empty nest was that I needed to do more rebuilding, and just get back to those, that time of just being the two of you and just it being focused on you. And I remember just praying different times over our relationship and just God aligning us and, just taking a real good look at that. And I remember just God coming to me one night in a dream after praying. And I happened to be on my own. Dave was traveling. And I remember it was so specific because I heard his voice as clear as a bell saying, "What is it that you want me to do for you?" And I heard myself say in this dream, "I want you to change this, 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 this." And I named about 6 things. To be very honest, I named about 6 things about myself that I wanted God to do. Isn't that interesting? I always think that when you go to the Lord with something, he always says to put a mirror in front of yourself first, right? And what was very interesting about that was that a couple years later, it wasn't like till probably a couple years later, when I was actually an empty nester, I remember praying that when you guys were still there. But it was when I became an empty nester that he provided the tools for me to be able to change the things that I had prayed in that prayer and that I had seen and heard in that dream. And I knew beyond a shadow of doubt that I had met with the Lord. There was no question in my mind. And so what happened was a friend of mine came to me and said, "Hey, Candy, there's going to be a coffee about mentoring." Well, that's just totally right up my alley. And she said, "Would you like to go?" And I said, "Of course." So I went, and what was presented that day was a ministry that was called the Home Mentoring, the Home Experience. And it was written by a pastor's wife out of Texas by the name of Debbie Titus. And there was 3 women in California who were going to put that ministry together using her material. And they had gone to her home for actually a 4-day intensive when they still had children. And they decided when they became empty nesters that they would put one on themselves. And I'm telling you, it was primo. I was one of the first groups that went through, and it was the most beautiful food, the most warm, inviting, lovely hospitality that you would ever want to experience in your life. And it was for a weekend. And through that, God just gave me different things and just led me on this journey of growth of who he really wanted me to be as a godly wife. And but some of the things that she imparted that really stuck with me was, first of all, the home is where the heart's formed. And your relationships in your home will either thrive and flourish under your care and your keeping, or they won't. And another one was about honoring your husband, that a lot of times we try to train our husbands and we honor our kids rather than vice versa. And then I'm trying to think of some, though I wrote these down so I wouldn't forget them. What it also provided in that is it provided that training was like just a complete perspective shift.
Mhm.
I think so many times that we forget as husband and wife that we're on the same team.
Right.
And I think in the media and in life that men can sometimes get a bad rap.
Mhm.
And we're to honor them.
Mhm.
Their most important thing that to them is that they're respected, even more so than feeling loved.
Mhm.
They are made innately by God to protect their wife,
Mhm.
to protect their children, to provide for them. And they will go to the ends of the earth to do that. They really, truly will.
Mhm.
And one thing, after I went through that training, one thing God showed me was kind of interesting. I went back to Illinois to put on one of those trainings for a group of my friends. And as I was coming back, I think, and Tara, you probably remember this, but I remember God giving me a picture of what it looked like to be out from under Dave's covering of protection.
Mhm.
You know, it talks in the Bible about being submitted to your husband or whatever. What that really means is coming under his provision and protection for you, because you are he's the covering for you
Mhm.
from the Lord.
Right.
And I said, all of a sudden I said to Tara, I said, I feel like I'm out here just blowing in the wind with no covering and protection.
Mhm.
And what I realized, it was God showing me that I was out from under that, because I was out here.
Mhm.
I wasn't under here.
Mhm.
And Dave was supposed to be my umbrella of protection from everything. And when we're moving independently from our husband and not moving in the same yoke with him, or not coming under what God has provided him to do, then we take a direct hit from the enemy, and we're not being protected.
One thing I want to add to that too is I feel like the like feminine, urge is to think, when you hear stuff like this, like, oh, I'm just second in command and what is my purpose? And I'm just to submit to my husband. But what I think that between the Love and Respect DVDs that we did at your house this past fall,
Yeah.
and then the Elijah study, and also this home experience, all three have talked about, actually it's a linking arms with your husband. It's not like he's more important and then there's the wife. It's actually like shedding a lot of light on how important the woman is in the relationship.
Right.
And I think that there's this, like I said, there's this feminine urge to be like, well, what about me? Or like, I'm just supposed to be this submissive wife and be a robot to my husband. It's actually it's very much the opposite of that. So if that's a spirit of offense that people might have when you're talking about marriage, I just wanted to clear the air that that's not really what that's talking about. Some of the things we're going to unpack, we wanted to talk about 3 principles and kind of go through them as a group, because all 3 of us have been through the home experience training with our mom at different times, and just kind of how it's impacted us, and kind of which principles really stuck out to us. We picked 3 to kind of unpack and chat about. But that was one thing that when we did the home experience the second time this past fall, and we watched the shortened videos, which I actually enjoyed those more. I was telling Tara that the long ones were really long, but she was saying, there's this tendency to want to be well, where do I fit? And what is my importance? Am I just supposed to be this stay at home mom, homemaker? And they're basically saying your husband or your spouse does not thrive without the woman being what she's meant to be. You know what I mean? It's not just she's this all powerful, all purposeful woman or man, and that you're just supporting what he's doing. You're actually I love the principle about the keeper of the home, and what the woman's role is, and how I remember Hillary, when we were doing this, there's our Hillary shout out. She was talking about hosting and talking about we talk about making a hospitable environment, but how different your home can feel when you're controlling the environment. And like Tara always says, like, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy, of like, you are the temperature keeper of the home. So anyways, we're going to jump into that, but I just wanted to like clear the air, because I think sometimes that gets misconstrued when you talk about marriage in a Christian
I also
context.
feel like
Go
I also
ahead.
feel like when people think about like Christianity, they always think like the woman should be submissive. And I feel like the way that God created the woman by pulling the bone or like the rib from Adam's side was very much so a picture of you're created equal.
Yeah.
You know, you're supposed to be equal, you're supposed to stand side by side, you are compatible, like you're the woman
You're a
in the home.
helper. You're a
Mhm.
helper.
Exactly. You're not,
Mhm.
he didn't take a bone from Adam's head, so you're not like above
Mhm.
your husband. He didn't take a bone from Adam's foot, you're not supposed to be like trampled below. He took a bone from his side, so
Mhm.
you're,
Oh, I
feel
love
like
that,
picture,
Whit.
Yeah.
I feel like that
That's a
picture
really
is
good
like, I feel like God is very symbolic, and like I feel like he does things even in the minute details of like how he created the woman
Yeah.
is very much so a picture of how God like intended for female like femininity. You know, you're not above or below, but you are equal.
One
Mhm.
thing I was going to add, and then I'll open it up since Tara hasn't got to talk. So for mom's 60th birthday, I've shared this before, but we went to Israel for her, like a Jesus tour. And one of the things I thought was really cool, our tour guide was actually Jewish. So she believed in Judaism and was raised in a Jewish home. And she was so cool, like so smart. And she knows the Bible, obviously, like the back of her hand, because she teaches it, but she's not a Christian believing Jew. She understands the religion for what it's worth. But anyways, she was talking about, we were in these caves where near where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And she was saying how many times Jesus mentions women in his ministry. And she was saying that Herod, who is the one who ended up ordering for Jesus to be killed, obviously he was the king at the time of Jesus's like time, his treasurer, essentially, I forget the guy's name, his treasurer's wife was one of the main women that used to travel with Jesus and like essentially funded his travels. So Herod was basically funding Jesus to spread the gospel. But she was just talking about how ironic that was, first of all. But in addition to the fact that like Jesus wasn't like singling out just men, like he had women who were the reason that he was able to continue his ministry, that were like integral parts of like him being successful. And I think that it was important for Jesus to put that in the Bible and make sure that that was, like Whitney was saying, that it was like aware, so that there wasn't this like competition of, even though I know there's a lot of sexism in culture, but like that women really aren't below, because they were just as important in Jesus's ministry as anybody else. So I thought that was a cool thing for her to mention when we were there. She was like, isn't it ironic, the guy that hated Jesus the most was actually funding his ministry because she was making money.
Well, I love it that, I mean, women are so important because they set so much the tone for the home,
Yeah.
and they're the ones that are the nurturers and all those things, and their strengths are so much, and guys aren't as much wired that way, and their strengths are usually ways that we're not wired as well.
Yeah.
Like I always appreciate Dave because he's such a he makes decisions very confidently and he can make them quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm pondering over something. I'll say, what do you think we should do on this? And he has an immediate decision, which is great. So he fills in where he has strengths that I feel like I don't have as much. And I think we can look at that totally as husbands and wives. There's always going to be things that they are going to be better at than what we are, and vice versa. But they all add to the whole of the home and what to family, what it's supposed to be.
Well, essentially, what we want to touch on before we get into it, the reason we think that this topic is important is because we feel like, the sanctity of home and marriage has been lost probably a lot in the last like 50 years. And it's not like this old fashioned, like get in the kitchen, like 50s housewife type of mentality. It's actually like our sacred calling as women and what we are meant to do in the home that I think is really special. And so there's a couple of principles that we learned in this training that we thought would be cool to share with you guys. Obviously, we're not going to go through the whole thing, that we thought would be really important, and maybe also kind of say how it like impacted. And also, you don't have to be religious for these to work, I guess is what I want to say. Like the table principle is awesome for anybody. So if you're not a Christian or you don't believe in Jesus and you're listening to this, I just want you to know, like, these aren't like specific necessarily to just being a Christ follower. So anyways, the first one that I think is probably my favorite is called the table principle, which I'll have my mom explain. But we wanted to get into 3 of the principles that we felt like were life-changing and kind of tell you guys like how we felt like it impacted us. So do you want to explain what the table principle is?
Well, the way that Debbie explained it was the first table was built for the tabernacle. It had the dimensions, and in the middle of that table in the Old Testament, in the tabernacle, was the different elements on the table. And one of those elements was the bread, which represented Jesus, who is the bread of life. And so she felt like that was very significant as she was praying about this training, that when you come to the table, that Christ is there with you. And the interesting thing about it from a secular perspective is that psychologists have found that kids who are eating at the table with their families 5 nights a week, that they're so well adjusted, there's less depression, there is less addiction. It's addiction, if at all, is rare, which to me is just huge in this culture and what families and parents are facing today. That kids love being around the table. The ones that only ate at the table 3 nights a week, when they were interviewed, said they wished it could be every night of the week. They wanted more of it. There's resolution that goes on as families are talking and having face-to-face time. They feel community, they feel accepted and wanted. So it's just incredibly, incredibly important. And one of the, I think Kate and some of the rest of you will remember this in her training. She talked about a man who came out of prison, and he had a very bad background. I think he had been convicted of like rape. He served his prison time and he came out, and her husband had a prison ministry. He said, "Hey, by the way, Debbie, I'm going to invite this man to our home for dinner." And so she fixed a meal, and they were all ready to get seated, and they were standing behind their seats. And she said, "Here, you can," she pointed for him, "You can sit right over here." And he wouldn't sit down. And she said, "No, here, this seat is for you, And he looked at her and he said, "Debbie, you don't understand. I've never sat at a table in my life. And I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to sit around a table and be, welcomed at a table, essentially." So how profound is something like that? How did that?
I was going to say, if you think about one thing that you had mentioned that has always stuck with me, and this is something that I can't remember which principle it is, but it's talking about like how people feel in your home. Which one is that one?
Probably hospitality.
Yeah, but just in general, you excel at that.
Right.
Like people have always said, you know, that when they're in your house, there's like a coziness and a warmth, and like you do your devotions and pray on your back porch. And people have always said like there's something so peaceful about Candy's porch. Like there's like they feel this like, you know, this almost like holiness because you have invested so much time with Jesus, and your house feels like peaceful because you've made it cozy and warm to others. But also I was saying, I don't know if you had mentioned this too, but you had talked about like when you're creating an environment that feels warm, it also like invites conversation. And obviously that happens most organically around a table because people are sharing and eating. And I feel like some of our most life-giving conversations with friends or like, you know, breakthroughs in our marriage or things that have needed to be discussed in our home have come from me cooking a meal and all us being around a table. And I don't even have kids yet. And I've seen the impact of this, you know, so much to the point where like, I almost don't enjoy going out to eat anymore because our times, I think that's why I love winter so much because me and Phil have so many meals together and that's like our favorite time. I'm also becoming a really good cook. So I feel like, but I don't know, Tara, if you want to speak to this, because you went through a season where your life was nuts. You obviously have a lot of kids and your kids are little. And you had said you had gotten in the habit of like picking up food a lot. And I think they even talk about it in the training that like, even if you get takeout, like set the table and make everyone eat like your McDonald's on a plate. Like you can still, even if you are in a bind, like who cares, like put the mac and cheese on a plate and still like have this family time, even if you have to pick it up. But do you want to kind of share about, you felt like that changed, right?
Well, I think too, one of the things that about the table principle that they talk about is Jesus like spoke to his disciples. Some of his most important messages were around the table or around a meal. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where that table principle also forms from. And I remember them saying that when they interviewed kids, like if you're constantly on the go, kids don't want to be eating their dinner in the car and don't want to necessarily like be living their life in a vehicle because they're going, you know, in 15 different directions. And it made me rethink the way that I would look at like extracurricular activities for my kids and how soon I would start them. Yeah. Because I just remember when I mentored with Diane, she was saying, I didn't want to watch my kids grow up from the sidelines and in the stands. And she was like, I didn't want their coaches to have a larger impact on their lives than what me and my husband do. Yeah. And so that just really impacted me because it's so easy to start as little as like 3, getting them in gymnastics and doing basketball and, you know, like all these extra activities that take them away in the evenings or could. And so that's something that I feel like I've tried to hold on to as long as I possibly can. One, because it makes our house less chaotic, but also because when one is in it, then the other 3 have to go too. Like, it's not like you just drop off the one and you can have dinner at home with the other ones. You're all sitting there at the game or you're all sitting there at the practice or whatever it is. And so I feel like that's the one thing that the biggest takeaway that I took from that table principle. What I find is that when we are sitting around the table and actually having conversation, you're way more intentional about it. Like if you're trying to do it quickly and everybody's got their device, or you have picked up food and like everyone's eating in segments, there's no conversation. But if you have sat down, you're actually learning about their day, because I feel like our days can be so wild depending on who's working, what hours, that it could literally be a whole week's going by and I don't know the inner workings of what's going on in the kids' day-to-day lives, like what's happening at school. But when we're sitting around that table, then I find out that Britton has a crush on 3 boys in her preschool class. and you know, and that Briley's typical is like, what did you do at school today? And she'll be like, I can't remember. So then you dive in and you say, well, what'd you have for snack? What'd you do at resource? What'd you have for lunch? Did you learn, and ask like these detailed questions. And then you get her to talk and expound.
Sounds like Phil, literally.
What'd you have for snack? What'd you have for lunch? So anyway, I just feel like that's been the time to really spend time getting to know the kids
Yeah.
on a better level. And there is a sense of, I feel like the kids feel more settled. Like if we're not doing that, we're getting out of sync. I just remember one of my friends saying that, it's important for your kids to see you two interacting. And sometimes if you're feeling like things feel out of balance or the kids are seemingly like unsettled, that you should be sitting there talking to them and allowing them to play at your feet, because there is a sense of security in your children being able to see you interact with your spouse. Because they can have an uneasiness if they sense that there is something off.
Yeah.
And it can cause them to act out. So those, and I feel like I can see that if we're not spending time together around the table.
Well, and I think too, there's a lot of, it's different for you guys now. You all work full time, as it is for a lot of moms now. And so that's a hard thing. I would say for the moms, just become a friend of your crock pot.
Yeah.
That you can throw something in the morning and you've got something when you walk in at night. It's particular if you're working away from home, or even if you are, at least you have something. I remember Debbie saying when they come into a cold stove and there's no smell of anything cooking, it makes them feel like they haven't been thought of. And I know those are hard things, because when you're working full time, you're putting in time at your work, then you're coming home and feeling like you're needing to put in time there too. But it will be, time well spent, just like you're all sharing. And I remember when we did it with Kate, your little group, I remember Bree talking about her little girl, and what was she, 2 or something? And she said because she was 2, they would feed her at their bar area. And that's where she would have dinner at night, and then they would, eat themselves. And after she took that training, she started putting her at the table, scooting her little high chair right up to the table. And she said, "Oh my gosh, what a difference that made." She was so excited about that. She thought it was so great that she had this undivided attention from her mom and her dad, both at the same time. They noticed a huge difference.
And she started asking.
She
started saying table, and like asking.
Really? That's interesting. I didn't remember that part, but yeah. I thought that was really cute.
Yeah, that is cute. One thing I was going to add, and then I'll let Whitney share on the table, but I also think, like, again, I take a lot of pride, and I know Whitney and Tara think this is funny because I don't have kids yet, and I'm sure it'll change, but I take a lot of pride in keeping my house clean. And I really try. And this is something I learned from Mom. Like, it wasn't like a mad dash, because I don't ever remember our house being a mess. Like, maybe it was, but
that's selective thinking.
Yeah, I don't remember it. My room was a mess, but I wasn't allowed to have friends over or do things if my room was messy. So I always had to clean it, because that was like the rule. The rule is like, go to the neighbor's house, I got to make my bed. So it kept me motivated to keep my room clean. But I just remember if it was like 5 o'clock and you would start cooking dinner and Dad was going to be home at 6, that there was always like an intention for the next hour that we would make sure the house was nice and that food was ready when Dad got home. And so, like, we had to pick up toys and put stuff away, and, like the kitchen, if we needed help you with the kitchen or you were setting the table and stuff. And like, maybe not always, but I just remember every night when Dad came home, food was ready and the house was clean. And knowing our dad now, and hopefully someday he'll get to share his story, because he has one of the coolest and craziest life stories of all time. Like, the things he's experienced are like, he was telling stories on your birthday a couple years ago to Blaine and Sky, and Sky was like, "How are you still alive? Like, you have the craziest life story ever." But he has one of the craziest entrepreneurial stories of all time, which we now have walked through hard times that we've shared about. And can respect our dad like tenfold more, knowing like how he's, just walked through the craziest stuff. So just knowing the amount of stress that you go through, like it was such a cool thing that you prioritized. And again, you were a stay-at-home mom. So I know this is really different for people that work full-time. And especially like you said, if you're not even working from home, that's even harder. But there was such a huge priority of you wanting him to walk in and be like, like take a deep breath. Work was really tough, or whatever he was dealing with. And that, we're going to sit at the table. The girls are going to be here and food's going to be ready. And I really feel like I want to honor you in saying that, because you did such a good job with that for so long,
Thank you. Well, I think part of that probably came from my mom.
Yeah.
She did such a good job. Mom and dad both. Dad worked nonstop. He would work all day, get up at 6 a.m, go work all day. And then he would come home for a 6 o'clock dinner, where she would have a full dinner on the table with all 7 of us kids sitting around the table. And he came home for dinner, ate dinner with us, and then he would go back and work some more till about 2 a.m. So he had an incredible work ethic, fortitude, whatever you called it. But he prioritized the evening dinner.
Yeah.
Mom would make meat, potatoes, salad, vegetable, sometimes dessert. I mean, seriously, for 7 people, that's pretty crazy. And she was a stay-at-home mom, but she raised 7 children while he was working hard.
Yeah.
And it obviously cost him, because he only lived to be 58 years old.
Right.
But that was good. And then when we were in high school, he would not only do that, but he would read the Bible to us at the table.
That's cool.
So because he was a man of faith. So
that's sweet. Whit, would you want to share on the table?
I was just going to say, whenever was like a year or so, or maybe even less than a year, we would always feed her first because she's a baby. And then we would go put her down to play, and then we would go sit down to eat. And I noticed that whenever all 4 of us would sit down to eat, she'd be sitting in the living room just staring at us, not playing. She'd be like, she wanted to know what was going on. She clearly had FOMO. And so finally, when I noticed that, I went and grabbed her little bumbo chair and sat her on the table, because we didn't have like a kid seat. So I sat her on the table, and she, like, at 8 months old, she thought this was like the best thing ever. And from that point on, like whenever we sat down for dinner, she would crawl over to us. And not like if I didn't put her in right away, because I was always planning to bring her from that point forward, but like she would either crawl over to us or toddle over. And when she got to be, it was like a year and a half where she could like she didn't have to sit in a kid seat anymore. Like she was able to crawl on and off a chair. She had claimed this one spot at the table that was her chair. And every time we sat down, even if she had already eaten or had her snacks or whatever, she would come and sit down. And now when we do like sit down dinners, like at the table, I try to do these more often. And like Kate said, if we do takeout, we'll sit down together. But now the boys, I realize boys don't chat. They're not as chatty as girls. So I figured out a way to get Indy involved, especially because he's always the one that was like not wanting to like divulge much information. We started doing this game that he played in preschool where you pick a letter of the alphabet and then you name off words that start with that letter.
That's cute.
And it was fun at the time, but now it's like 2 years later and it was like, oh my gosh, you guys already know. Like, so we've moved into US facts and like the states, and they want to move into countries, and I'm just like, guys, there's a place where my knowledge caps out, and it stops at countries. Like I know the continents, but I can't remember the names of countries that start with a letter A. It stops at like
you might want to stay away from US history.
Oh my gosh.
We discovered that
They-
yesterday.
they kept pushing me. I had to pull up Google to figure out like US history facts. And I'm like, this is stuff you guys aren't gonna know. But yeah, they like have now always want to play games at dinner, which is great, but also exhausting on my brain.
Yeah.
And then Cheech is sitting there, right? And I'm like, name a word that starts with A. And the boys will be like, apple. And then Cheech will be like, apple. And then she like claps for herself and like thinks she's gotten one right. So she will not be dismissed from a conversation. She is definitely a part of it. But yeah, I feel like the table for sure is kind of where we do all of our like communicating and have the most fun. And otherwise everybody can kind of tend to go their separate ways. Riv will go play his Xbox downstairs. Indy will go play on his iPad, and Ever's just kind of wherever everybody else is. But so I feel like the table is a good place to start with food and then move into games.
That's the memory they will probably remember when they get older. Because we used to do a family Bible study, right? And I used to always my favorite thing was when we were praying, I was always trying to get Whit in trouble for having her eyes open during prayer. And then Dad was like, how would you know her eyes are open? Yours are closed.
Were those the animal studies?
Yeah.
The character sketches that took forever to read at the table.
And then I'd get in trouble because Whitney and I would fall asleep if they were like too long because we were like reading them before we ate. It's so funny. Okay, just for the sake of time, we'll move into the next one. So the next one we wrote down that we wanted to discuss was, you said what you felt like was the most important, which was honoring your husband, which I know sounds self-explanatory, but do you want to expound upon that?
Well, I think the thing that has been super helpful, a couple different things. First of all, know the personality of your husband and your kids. The personality type that helps in a huge way. Dave and I are total opposite personalities. So the things that he is strong in, like I said, I'm not as strong, and vice versa. That helps in really understanding them and not trying to mold them into who you think they should be, right, or to make them like you. That's huge, number one. And secondly, I think, and after I did the Love and Respect DVDs by Emerson Eggerichs, said that the most important thing for a man is to feel respected, more so than being loved. A woman wants to be loved, a guy wants to feel respected. If he doesn't feel that respect, it limits his ability to be able to love. So in other words, as you respect them, your husband as a wife, they will in turn, it promotes love in them for you. And I thought it was just so cute because when we were on vacation, I don't golf. And Dave is an avid golfer and a good one. So there were different times when I rode with him on the golf cart. And it reminds me of a story that Emerson told us. He was training on Love and Respect. And it was so cute because the same thing happened with Dave. But I'll tell you his story first. Was a husband and wife. The husband was going to go out hunting. And he took the wife along. She decided she'd ride along with him. They rode to where they were hunting. She never said a word. She was actually trying this out. She never said a word while they rode to the blind. They got in the blind, never said a word the whole time because they had to be quiet. She got back into the vehicle and rode all the way home. And when they got home, the husband said, that was the best day, honey. I was just so glad you went with me. That's the best day of my life. And she hadn't said a word the whole time.
That would be Phil. You'd be like, wow, we had so much fun. I'm like, we didn't talk.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
But all she did was to spend time and spend quality time. So when we were on this vacation to Hawaii, I thought, well, I don't really I don't really care whether or not I'm laying out by the pool. That doesn't, at my age, I got to be careful of my skin anyway.
Mhm.
And so there were different times that I rode the golf cart with him, and while he golfed, and usually he was in a foursome with, with other people. But this one day we went, and when we got back, he said, "Honey, thanks so much for riding along with me." And I'm thinking, I rode, we made, small talk during the whole 18 holes, of how he was playing or what he was playing. And, but it meant everything to him
It's so sweet.
to have that quality time, what he, just to be that support. And I thought, isn't that so cute? I mean, guys can be, even if it's sitting down watching TV with your husband while he's doing that, or whatever the interest is, you're just there together, doing it together. And it feels like that you've intentionally thought of them.
A couple things I want to add to that. One, you guys will agree with this. Our dad can tell you any game of golf he has played and specific stories about certain holes that he played. Like he'll be like, I'll be like, how's golf today? He's like, well, on the 17th hole, I had this amazing shot. I got out this driver. And he like literally could replay. His memory is
18 holes.
Yeah. Even when it comes to golf, but he'll be like recounting stories from like 7 years ago. And he'll be like, we were playing in Pebble Beach. It was a par 5, hole number 6. I'm like, how do you remember that? Like, it's so insane, but it's like, it's incredible. Anyways, that's just a funny side note. But what I was going to say is when we've done this training, not only my friends, but there's so many moments in this training where the first thing you want to say is, what about me? Do you not agree? And I feel like in this specific scenario, you get to a point of the training where and this is what I'm going to touch on, and then I'll ask you a couple more questions, let the girls fill in. But like, I think you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much information about what I have to do. And I think the home experience partners really well with love and respect because they go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I feel like was so clear about love and respect, and when you really feel like you're investing, is you get back so much more than what you put in with such little effort to respect your husband. And I think the thing that I learned was to be like, I've shared this before. There was a season where Phil was really unhappy. He was on the road with an artist that was like, it was a very trying time, and morally there was things happening that we didn't love. And it was just like a season where a lot of his friends were in the come up, and he was like, he wasn't thinking this, but I was kind of like, everybody else is having success and Phil has paved the same road. And like, when is it going to happen for me? He was also waking up really early to valet at a hotel to make extra money. And so it was just this season where I felt like his attitude was poor because he basically like hated what was going on, to the point where like you guys also noticed it and you're like, is Phil okay? Like, he's kind of moody. And my instinct was to be, I used to always say, like the other day we got at a church, this is kind of funny. We got at a church and he was super grumpy. And I was like, Phil, have the joy of the Lord. And he goes, I have it. And I go, access it. Like, he was just being so grumpy. I'm like, find it and practice it. It's like, where is it? But
I'm gonna use that one.
What'd you say?
I'm gonna use that one on Brian. Access it.
Access your joy. And then of course it made him laugh. So then like it broke the moment. But I used to, instead of recognizing the phase of life he was in, I was constantly nitpicking his attitude. And my downfall in that season of our marriage was I was constantly like, you're mean, you're rude, why are you treating me this way? And I was constantly saying things that were negative, which perpetuated the problem, to the point where Phil was like, I thought that I'm a nice person, but you make me feel like I'm not. Or like,
Oh.
I think I am a nice person. Am I actually rude? But it was because his behavior was poor because he was tired and he didn't like going to this hotel 5 days a week at 5 a.m., which who would want that? And I had taken a pay cut to help start Royal and Reese, and he was taking this extra job to cover the difference. And so he was actually filling in the gaps for me financially, but my blinders were on just because he was tired and grumpy. But he was actually making a massive sacrifice for our family from a financial standpoint. And all I could do was give him feedback about how he was like rude and grumpy. So, anyways, now I regret all of that and I see it, but I was really young at the time. I was like 24 and I just didn't see it from that lens. And Tara says this too, like you'll get a lot farther with me by saying kind things, but you could apply that to anybody. Like nobody wants to be criticized 24/7. And now I feel like, I mean, I always like say this, not in a way that I want to like gloat, but I have a fantastic marriage. Like we get along super well, probably to the point where it's like cringeworthy. And what I was like joking with Tara that we literally say, I love you if we leave the room. Like if he's going upstairs to the studio, he'll be like, I love you. Like it's cringy for sure. But like I feel like because we've had so much time without children, we've built the communication and the relationship so deeply as a foundation. But a lot of that training came from me also, like you said, the lens, the mirror, I was constantly being like, Phil needs to change. And when in reality, it's like that Taylor Swift song. It's like, is it me? Am I the problem? Like, I think that was the problem. When I was like, there's nothing wrong. I'm happy go lucky all the time. Like I'm the one doing this, that, and the other for the marriage. And he's the one being grumpy. But in reality, like you said, you can only control yourself and what output you have. And 9 times out of 10, if you're doing what you're supposed to, your marriage will be really lovely because that person will feel respected and loved. What, or Tara, do you want to add to that?
I was just gonna say, I feel like it is really easy to point fingers at your spouse, being like, well, you don't do this, or I always have to do the dishes, or I don't know. In our home, it's like service related because like one of us is always, if one of us is manning the children, the other one is cleaning and vice versa. So like it's easy to point fingers and be like, oh, he didn't put his stuff away again. Like it's very easy to like get all bent out of shape. But then I have been praying into that, and the Holy Spirit, as soon as like a thought like that comes into my mind, the Holy Spirit opens my eyes to something that I left out as well. And I'm like, oh, dang it. Like, not just him that's making a mess. It's also me, but you're blind to like your own mess, essentially. So I feel like if something like that comes in where you get a spirit of offense, or you're offended about something he said or something he did or some mess he made, literally turn the finger back at yourself, because he's living with your mess as well. Like he's like mess in a metaphor, like he's living with you as well. None of us are perfect. And like Mom said, something that I really loved is that we're on the same team. Like you aren't on 2 separate lines. You're not battling each other. You're on the same team. Like, so especially with raising kids, like you're tag teaming in and out. Like some days I'm not going to be all mentally there and I'm going to like tag you in. And other times I am going to be on top of it. The dishes are going to be done and you can just sit back and relax. And that's okay. I'm not going to sit there and do the dishes and in my brain think, wow, he's so lazy for not helping me.
Is it like when you prayed? Is it like when you prayed for God to multiply your patience?
Yeah. Wait, what was the story of that?
You were having no patience with the kids and you asked God to multiply your patience, and he said that's not a lot.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I was like I sit down with God every morning and I'm like, God, I need you to multiply my patience, because I've just been like, I have none. And I was like, here's my patience. And God laughed at me, like just laughed. And he's like, that's not a whole lot. And I was like, that's why I need you to multiply it. I like the visual of turning the finger that you're pointing back on yourself, because number one, it is starting with you. Like I notice a lot of times if I'm stressed or anxious, I'm actually thinking that like the reason I'm stressed or anxious is because there's something they're doing, when really I am just taking it out on them. So if you just point the finger back at yourself and acknowledge this has nothing to do with them, this is everything to do with my attitude, you can kind of pray into that and pray that God kind of just helps you work through it. And also acknowledging that you are on the same team. You're not fighting against each other in the battle, like you're fighting together.
Right.
Well, Brian's a huge quality timer. And I think one of the ways we can get disconnected is when that quality time isn't happening. And not so much even from like a date night perspective, but just like a quality time as a family. And one of the things that I've always known about him since like we met was that he loves the farm, and he loves being there. Not even so much of like having to be in a tractor physically and farming, but just being at the farm. So this fall we made it a priority to go up there and take the kids and let them drive the golf cart and all that stuff. And I was like filming it because I was going to make a reel out of it, out of our day. And I just have this clip of us, like I was on the Ranger with the kids and he was on the golf cart, and we were like passing by each other, like side by side. And the glimpse on his face of that pure joy was something that's like forever etched in my brain, because there was a softness and a like true just a true joy that was there on his face. And I could tell it was because we were all there together. Because a lot of times in the past when things have been busy, he would take the girls up and I would stay home with the baby or whatever, and I wouldn't go. And I just knew what, how important it was to him that I had come and I had brought all the kids up and I had made that a priority. And so that's one thing that I always feel like I can sense with us. But the other thing too is that I feel like we've kind of traded off, like you were saying, like what Phil was filling in the gaps and things like that. You know, when he was at CAT, I was very much like I had to come home from work at a certain time to make sure I was home for the babysitter, and had that time till he got home. And then we kind of flip-flopped roles, and he was home early and was able to do all that kind of stuff while I was working late. And now that I'm back, you know, working from home, we've kind of flip-flopped again now that he's in a new position. So I feel like it's given us the opportunity to have an appreciation for one another that may not have necessarily been there before, because we both hadn't done it. And now that we both experienced it, we understand what that is like, because you know, we call that the witching hour from like 4 to 6 when you're home with the kids during that time frame. There's just a lot going on. There's lots of noise. And so I just feel like for us, we've been kind of through I feel like we've kind of had like a full circle over the last 2 years as far as just understanding each other in a better capacity.
Right.
And some of that is just being like full immersion into each other's sides, seeing it from different perspectives, I think is what
we were doing a live last night, and Tara's doing a sample sale, and she's like, okay, so I have 4 belt bags in coral. Girls, can you go get Briggs? Okay, so these are 22 hours. Girls, can you go get Briggs? He's crying. And then she's like, Brett, can you call daddy? Yeah, tell him I'm on a live. Okay, so anyways, so we have these for $10. Yeah, tell him I do want him to go to Walmart, and we do need milk.
That's hilarious.
And Briggs comes down and he's like crying at her feet. And she's like, okay, so Chris Iverson wants this sweater. Briggs, you're so grumpy. She's getting you chips. Brecken, can you get some chips? Okay, Chris Iverson wants this one. She's like, and all the comments were so funny. They were like, Tara's super mom. Like, you're literally like, Briggs, if you're going to be grumpy, you're going to go back to bed. And she's like, Brecken, please get Briggs some chips. Okay, so Elizabeth wanted the $10 pink sweater.
Oh, that's cute.
And I was like, is this not such a true picture of our business from the very beginning? Because there has been screaming babies on lives for 8 years now. And it was so funny. I just loved it. She's like, yes, tell daddy I do want him to go to Walmart and we do need milk. Brecken's like calling him on her iPad. It's so funny.
That's darling.
It's cute. Anyways, I will say, I feel like I also feel like it's difficult when, what I was going to say is, I was going to give Tara a compliment. What I was going to say is, I feel like it's difficult when you are an over communicator and you're married to someone who finds it hard to use words to communicate. And I don't mean that as a slam, but we both have husbands that there's like an inner monologue happening, not an outer monologue. And I feel like when you're trying to communicate to someone who internally processes, when you're the person who's you and I both need words to survive, especially like words of AF. And when it's hard for someone to give those, it challenges your marriage even more. And so I feel like you've done such a good job, one, of really like, not only like learning Brian's personality, but also like respecting it in a way that he really feels loved. And I know that's taken time, obviously, because it all takes us time to learn our spouse better. But especially with the added elements of kids and loss and, business being crazy and us living through a pandemic, like I feel like you've really, like, I remember when you like made the decision to be like, I'm going to be better at this. And you told me and Whitney, and it's just been cool to watch like how good your marriage is and how sweet, your story has become between the two of you growing so close after Briar and now having Biggies as like your balm for the soul. But even in the summertime, how important it is for Brian to get in the pool. Like he just loves the kids in the pool time. And you were like, I'm going to get in because I always like worry about what I'm going to look like in a swimsuit and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm going to start swimming. Or like, he loves bike rides with the kids and he loves getting ice cream. And so you even said all those things like this summer, we're going to get ice cream. We're going to go on those bike rides. Like we're going to do things as a family.
I'm going to marvel at his garden.
Even though I will eat no vegetables from it.
I haven't quite gotten to the marveling part, but I'll work on it.
I was just saying that.
Putting up the vegetables will be good.
Yeah.
I think that's a good segue, Caitlin, into the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to love our spouse with the love language that we feel loved with.
Right.
So, and if we are, it can mean nothing to them if it's not theirs. Right. So you've got quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation, gifts, and what's the 5th one?
Physical access service.
Access service, yeah.
Whitney's favorite.
Yeah, those are really good to if you want to start someplace, if you feel like, in your relationship that you need to start rebuilding, that's a really good place to start, is to just be an observer of your spouse and say, what is it that really makes him feel loved? Mm-hmm. And then, when he's doing the things for you that make you feel loved, reinforce it. Let him know that that's really meaningful to you because it is your love language. And
right.
And but that's a great place to start, is to start investing in that way.
Well, let's wrap up with the last one. We won't spend as much time on this one, and then we'll do a compliment for Mom because we have to do it for every guest. What is the meaning of the sanctity and the dignity of your home?
Are you wanting me to speak?
Or sorry. What does that mean? That's the last principle we said we were just going to touch on. So we won't have to talk about it as long as we did the other two.
I think one thing that was stated in that training, which I thought was so good, is that is to be so intentional. She was saying the rise and fall of the empire is how the family is going, whether the family is surviving and thriving or whether the family is being torn down. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really important to know that everyone everyone wants peace and love in their home, and to work intentionally to make that happen. And since you are the keeper of it, you know, you can be very intentional in making that happen so that everybody there is thriving. That's what I would say. And one thing that she used was, it's like being in a revolving restaurant. Here you have a view, right? And as that restaurant turns, all of a sudden you look out and the view has changed. And I think that what we have to guard against as individuals and is that culture is going away from some of the values that we're talking about, and maybe not making them as important. And so that view is changing. It's changing. And all of a sudden we can be swept with that view, and we look out and we go, gosh, what happened? So I think it's living every day intentionally for your family, for your marriage. And even, I want to say this, a friend of mine just relayed that even for her daughter, who went through a devastating thing in her marriage and is now single, she took up that table principle and continued to eat at the table because she felt like it was so important just for her individually.
Cool.
So I think no matter what place that you're in, whether you're married, you're single, you're divorced, any of those situations, you can apply what we've talked about in the relationships that you have in your life. And they truly make a difference.
One thing that, going back to your mantle comment that we talked about with love and respect too, was you said the man might be the mantle and the head of the marriage, but you are the head of the home.
Right.
And I thought that was such a cool picture of, like, there's a huge responsibility on women to really protect the house. And like, I joke, like Tara was always saying, like, mama ain't happy, nobody happy. Like, if you're not working on yourself and in a good place, your home will be affected, by where you're at. And I've mentioned this before, but I just think about where I was mentally and spiritually in 2020. And I'm so grateful that God waited until 2023 to give me a baby, because the mom I would have been in 2020 when we were starting is not the mom I'm going to be in 2023. Like, it's like, I'm so much more secure in my faith. I believe and love Jesus more than I ever have. My marriage is in a completely different place. My career is in a completely different place. Phil's career, like, everything is different. And I just think about what kind of mom I'm going to be now, because I have my stuff sorted, and my house sorted. And I feel like I've really put these things that you've taught us into practice of, like, how to be the best keeper of my home. I don't feel scared of being a mom, and I don't feel nervous. I mean, I know it's going to be hard. I'm not trying to downplay motherhood whatsoever, because I know it's going to be difficult. I just feel like mentally and spiritually, I'm so much more prepped because I've had all this time to do that. And so I'm just grateful that, I've had that time to, like, process so much of that, which has been a blessing. You guys got anything to add?
No.
That when I was praying about what needed to be said on here, and just felt like the Lord telling me that just encourage all of you. I mean, you gals are doing a tremendous work. If you have children and you're raising children, if you're married, if you're single with children, whatever it may be, I know that you are busting your backside, you might say, to just put things together and to do what you need to do, and be encouraged in that. And that what you do every day is super important, and that you can flourish by
Mhm.
being intentional.
Mhm.
You'll receive blessing in doing that.
That's cool. Well, we're going to end the episode with a compliment to our mom. This is my
Oh.
favorite game. Now that you've gotten to pour out to everyone, we're going to fill you back up with saying something nice. So we're going to start with Wit.
Saying a compliment for mom.
Yeah.
I feel personally okay. We always start these compliments off with me, and then I always like veer on the way like side of funny, and then Kate comes up and has like the most nicest thing to say, and I'm like, well, I meant that, and I always sound like I'm like just
It's
not
like Kate
respectful.
has great hair. Anyways, next.
Yeah. Okay, well, here's the thing too, is I'm not a words of af person.
I know, it's fine.
So I feel like the words of af people are always the one that have like the most nicest compliment. But I feel very grateful that you have implemented a lot of these principles growing up, so that way we had a home that we could mimic it after when we did get married. And so I just am really appreciative that you're so intentional about it. And then I'm also really grateful too that you really walk the walk instead of talk the talk as far as your relationship with Jesus. So that way you showed us how to do it. So when I did start getting visions, you weren't turned away from it. You're like, oh yeah, I did too. Like you knew how to like mentor me in them and like talk about them, and like you meet new people in the airport and have this whole Jesus moment where you are now best friends with someone. I'm like, how does that happen? But you are like literally walking the walk, which I think is really cool. And it's really cool too that you our children have that example as well.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Grandma Tilly was a matriarch of sorts. She was the queen, and we all respected her, and she did a lot of these principles as well. And I feel like you are that for our family, but in a, not that she wasn't godly by any means, she was very much so godly, but I am very grateful that you are also exemplifying that in our family as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know too that if I need to redecorate a room and I ask you about it, you are going to give me a ton of examples. You deep dive into the internet and just start shooting me links. And
Dog to a bone. Dog to a bone.
I literally don't have to do any work. You do it for me. And then you end up like paying for things that I never meant for you to do. And you're like, I'll just get it for you. I'm like, well, that is very kind of you. But yes. So as far as a loving mother, I feel like we hit the jackpot, and I'm just really grateful for you, your spiritual leadership. And you're just go with the flow spirit. And you never take up a spirit of offense, but instead you like help us change our perspective on someone. So if I'm like angry, which happens more than I like to admit, if I'm angry about something, you also come in with like a more heavenly perspective and makes me shift my spirit a little bit, which I am really grateful for. And yeah, I know that if I need help, you are right there.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
Tara?
Well, I've said this a lot lately, but I think the thing that I feel like that has hit me really hard over the last 2 or 3 months is just the reality of how grateful I am for the support system in my life. And I think that I was naive to believe that a lot of people had that. And I think that a lot of times actually the reality is that it's the exception to the rule than it is the rule. And so that when you go through a hard time, a lot of people don't have somebody to fall back on. They don't have a mom to call and ask advice about. And if they do, they may not have a great relationship with them and or someone who has wisdom or a godly perspective to be able to point them back to Christ. And so that's something that I think I'm just super grateful for, because as you grow up, you hope that you can expound wisdom on your children. And in my head, I'm still the kid. Like, I'm not the mom. You're still the mom, and I'm still the kid learning from you. And so I haven't shifted that in my head yet, that this is like, oh, I'm supposed to be having this wisdom to expound now on these children, because in my head, I haven't hit the adult stage yet. And so I recognize, as I've gotten older and now have become a mom myself, the sacrifices that you made for us as kids, that you don't realize until you are in that position. And the appreciation that you have, like the appreciation we have for dad and the respect level we have for dad for going through all these entrepreneurial things. When I look back at how you handled certain situations, whether it was with the way that you parented us or the way that you handled them in your marriage or whatever, there's just such an appreciation and respect level there that I look at it from my own perspective and think that I don't know if I would have been able to handle it that way. And so I think that there's just always been this, you've always exuded the love of Jesus. You've always pointed us back to him. And you have always been this role model that is what I always want to strive to be. And so I was going to start to say something and now I forgot what it was. Oh, the thing that hit me too is that you never took credit for anything. Like when we were talking about Valentine's Day the other day, and I was like, Dad never forgot getting us Valentine's at school. And it dawned on me, like, that was Mom. It might have been Dad's idea, but Mom's the one that like called the florist and like sent it to the school and all these things. And she never once took credit. She wasn't like, you guys, I'm the one that did all that. Your dad didn't do that. She let him take the credit all these years for like the wonderful Valentines that we've had, which again, might've been his idea, but she did all the legwork for it. And never once did you ever steal that thunder from him.
Yeah.
You let us continue to believe that Dad did it all. and we've had these wonderful Valentine's memories for years and years and years. And it was you behind it all. It literally hit me at the age of 42 and I was like, wait, I bet that wasn't Dad.
The funny thing is, I didn't connect that until you said that like 2 days ago. I was like, oh, it probably was Mom.
Oh, that's funny.
But it would have been my natural reaction if Brian had told me to do that. Like, I probably would have with the kids been like, well, I'm the one that ordered it. Like, I helped here too, and you never did. You just, and I was just thinking back on like the other day, like, I was like, there's a lot of instances like that may have been his idea, but you're the one that executed it. And you never took the glory. You always allowed us to still cherish that relationship with him and those special things that we got to do with him, so that you instilled that strong relationship with Dad.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to happen. I always knew it was really important for you girls to feel cherished by him. So
yeah,
that was super important.
Plus,
so much secretary, right? I'm his secretary. He still has me do that. Will you Google such and such and look up and send me that phone number and that address and that? I still do that. Yeah.
I have so much to say, but I will say one.
Thank you, Tara. By the way, thank you.
You and Dad are both incredibly generous, like beyond generous. But one thing I think about you is that you're so generous with everything, not just like your money. You're so generous with your time. And the other day, a couple weeks ago, I said something to the girls. I was like, have you noticed that Mom never complains? Like, I don't know if I've ever heard her complain. And I was like, no, really. And I don't remember you complaining when we were growing up. And I don't remember, like, even if you are working your tail off at one of our houses doing projects and stuff, you come over with this like get it done attitude, and you're so incredibly helpful and so generous with your time. And that's so hard to come by with someone who's so willing to spend their entire day shipping samples with me for 9 hours. It's backbreaking work. You drove to the post office. But you are like that with everyone in your life. If someone has a baby, you're dropping off a meal. If someone's moving, you're helping with the move, unpacking the boxes. If someone, is underwater, you're offering to help in any way, whether it's time or financially. And I feel like you host people 24/7 in your home. You make them these exquisite meals where you do breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, you always make everyone feel so thought of. And I think that's why everyone is so feels so warm when they're with you, is because you have this intention around loving people well. And I think that's something Grandma Tilly was so good at as well. Like, she loved people with her food and with her home and with her words, but you've also done it in the way that you mentor women. And I think that's been such a gift to watch you. I joke that there's some times where you talk to my friends more often than I do, because you're like, oh, well, I talked to her on the phone. I prayed over her for this, that, and the other. And oh yeah, we had lunch last week. You're always so intentional with these relationships. But you had made a comment a couple months ago where you said, when you're with someone, you want to be the fragrance of heaven. And you were saying that about our business. And I was like, that's what you are. You are the fragrance of heaven. You're so intentional that everyone around you feels like they get a piece of heaven when they're with you. And I think that's why people flock to you and want to be around you and want to be in your home. And because you spend so much time with Jesus, he gives you these nuggets of truth for other people. And so you're able to speak into people's lives with so much confidence and so much truth that it makes them really get a piece of heaven, which I think is one of the coolest gifts that you have. But all the things that Whitney and Tara have said is true. The other thing I want to say as a mom, and something I feel like I really want to do, is you were so present when we were growing up. And that's something that you do so well now, is not only if we need help, but you're so present with your time of being present at things, but also present. If we just are stressed about something and we need to call you, you always answer the phone. You always talk us through it. And you're always, and like Whitney said, not only just talk us through it, but you're always well, let's stop and pray. And so there's always an intentionality of going back to everything, back to the Lord. It's not just we're going to sit and stew about it. We're going to bring it to God's feet and pray it. And I think some of my favorite memories in my adult life have been the last couple of months that us four have spent daily time praying together. And Tara said that too. Every time we pray, she's like, I know this is unusual. Not a lot of families have a FaceTime every day and pray. But I've just learned so much from the way that you've handled adversity and the way that you prayed into wanting to see change. And it's strengthened my faith so much in your belief and how specifically you pray about things and how specifically you believe into outcomes, that I'm it's made me want to believe more, and really believe in that way. And I just remember at the beginning of January, I told you I was so nervous to be off work, because I have this panic about when I'm off work, that sales are not going to do well and that everything's going to go to crap. And I have this control issue. And you were like, okay, well, let's just start praying today, every day, that sales will be taken care of and that things will be fine, so that when you do IVF, you won't be stressed. And I was like, oh, I never thought to pray about it. It's just you instantly you're okay, we're going to pray, and we're going to pray every day, and we're going to pray, intentionally. And so it's you've all, like Tara said, you've always pointed us back to Christ, no matter what the situation is. And I think our pastor talks about the spirit of offense a lot. And I think that the spirit of offense is the main way that the enemy creates division. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we see so much division in our culture, is that people find a reason to be offended by things so easily, and twisting words and narratives to mean something someone didn't mean to say. And instead of that, I feel you never have the spirit of offense, and you really take someone's words and you say either you conflict resolution, or you also like, you never see the worst in someone. I feel like you always are looking at it from, like I said, the lens of heaven, which I think is just such a gift. But yeah, I feel like all my friends are like, how do I get in on like Candy's friendship? Like, how do I start becoming for like lunch hangs and prayers? Because there's a handful of my friends that have now become close with you and that you've mentored like on a one-on-one and in a group basis. And they know it's like such a special gift to be in your inner circle because you intercede for people in a way that nobody does, you know? And I know that you said this about your friend, but you said that your friend is living so closely to the Lord. You feel like she's in the holy wild. And I think you've been in the holy wild. You have been there for a long time because the Lord uses you so much. And so, like, what's the word I'm looking for? So intentionally with everyone that you come across. So I think you are the holy wild.
Well, you've painted me much. You've all painted me much, much more positively.
No, it's all true.
I think. I mean, I appreciate your sweet words. It's wonderful to hear from somebody else's perspective.
Yeah.
But I really honestly have to give glory to God because, you know, with all these things, as I look back over my life and just walking through business adversity and all the things that you walk through, it's just by the grace of God that you do it as, you know, to the best of your ability,
Right.
Because he just empowers you to do it. And so I can't take that credit for me. It's just, you know, he placed wonderful people in my life and wonderful Bible teachers in my life, and they all had their impact of what they taught me and helped me to implement, you know, the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I can't take credit for that, but so I just
you're just proving what we're all saying.
well, I'm going to give the shout out to God where the glory really should go because you know what I mean.
No, it's true. Well, we're very grateful for all of your words of wisdom and just chatting through this. I know this could be like a 6-hour episode just because there's so much to unpack when it comes to marriage and relationships, which we'll have to do another episode sometime about even just prayer, because I feel like us four have transformed a lot in the last year, just with the way that we've prayed and what we've believed for and how we've changed our families, our lives, and our business over prayer. I think it's a cool topic. So maybe that's something we can talk about later, but we love you so much, Mom.
I love you too.
Thanks for your time. And thanks for everyone that has listened to Sisterhood Society podcast. If you would like to rate our podcast, if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple, and you can watch the episodes on YouTube every single week. All right, guys, we love you and we'll see you in the next one.
Love you. See you later.